It bled red steam when it bit through the hull, and laughed while it did it. Senator Ulrich Morn's secondary jaw clicked involuntarily as the words hung over the council chamber. The recording was barely audible through the atmosphere-stabilized dome, but it had already become infamous. It was the final voice log of Lieutenant Keir of the Delvasi frontline fleet, sent moments before the Lorik Toon shattered the command frigate Kara-Tool and consumed its crew. The chamber fell into silence, easy, bitter, not from reverence but from the failure it represented. Morn leaned back, the scales along his neck vibrating with suppressed agitation. The council floor's luminescent tiles cycled through blue to amber, signifying emergency quorum. 37 species were represented here, each cloaked in ceremonial garb, though none could disguise the tension written in their gestures. Tentacles twitched, feathers rustled, eye stalks stilled. All awaited the next motion. The Delvasi loss marks the 14th failed engagement with Lorik Toon assault elements in 68 standard cycles. Morn said, eyes sweeping the delegation, and the 4th instance of prey behavior from predator-class species within our own ranks. A chorus of low-frequency clicks, chirps, and hums followed, each species translating grief into sound. Containment has failed, he added. So has deterrence. The Unified Treaty of Biological Sovereignty prohibits extinction protocols, yet every cycle they grow bolder, more coordinated. They don't merely strike, they test. High Archivist Drelf of the Antari Alliance rotated his crystalline spine segments, a motion equivalent to a sigh. They are not raiders, he said. They are systematic. Every kill is calculated. They do not conquer territories. They disassemble civilizations to study our limitations. Morn nodded slowly. And if we don't evolve our methods, we will remain the subject of that study. Across the chamber, Councillor Elgrin Jor, representative of the Vakal Consortium, shifted in his containment field, mandibles flicking with disdain. Evolution through cooperation is preferable to desperation, he said sharply. But dragging in unverified, underdeveloped species in the middle of a galactic predator crisis, is the humans made contact, interrupted Morn. They didn't beg to be here. We sent the invitation. Jor's compound eyes narrowed. An administrative courtesy, not a strategic decision. From the periphery, a section of the floor, irised open, and elevated a small platform. Upon it stood 2 figures. One, in darkened diplomatic armor, crested with the insignia of Earth's Terran Coordination Authority. The other taller, leaner, expressionless, wore no insignia, no medals, no rank markers, only matte black. Morn observed a curious pause ripple through the chamber, a stillness not born of reverence, but unease. Even the Jareen delegates, who prided themselves on emotionless logic, tilted slightly backward. The diplomat stepped forward. His tone was even, calm but with the rigid edge of practiced command. I am Commander Dres Calvor of Earth. I come not with declarations, but solutions. The chamber waited. We've studied the Lorik Toon, not through orbital scans, not through intercepted signals. We studied them through behavior, body angles, muscular tension, cortical response loops. They're not unpredictable. They're primitive hierarchy-based predators, operating under unrecognized social patterns. Patterns, Jor snapped. You believe you can reduce an apex extinction species to a pattern? Halvor's lips barely twitched. Reduction is survival. He stepped aside. The second figure remained silent. This is Specialist Razin Volt, Halvor said. He is trained in zero-atmosphere threat mechanics, biomechanical engagement, and predator subordination theory. He will serve as Earth's embedded behavioral tactician for this mission. Volt didn't move. He didn't blink. One of the Trascan counselors emitted a low-frequency whine. It doesn't speak. Halvor adjusted his coat. He speaks when it matters. The council chamber broke into micro-discussions. Scales flared. Flashes of heat signatures darted between species. Morn studied them with a practiced eye. Not one representative understood what Volt truly was, and that was intentional. Halvor spoke again, this time addressing the assembly. You've tried brute force, intelligence, diplomacy, all failed. Not because the Lorik Toon are superior, but because you engage them like equals. They do not respect treaties. They do not understand protocol. They understand dominance. Earth knows this. We evolved among predators that didn't reason. They reacted. Jor's voice turned sharp. And you claim this. This experiment will do what 13 fleets failed to. No, Halvor said. He won't try what you did. He'll do what only humans can. Which is? Demanded Morn, though he already sensed the answer. Halvor's gaze met his. Assert biological authority. The room went still. The ambient lighting shifted as the laser plasma displays, suspended in midair, updated with recent orbital footage. Violent spirals of debris, cracked planetoids, torn hulls, like shattered ribs. The damage wasn't abstract, it was loss. Recorded frame by frame. Morn didn't flinch. He watched as he always did, but this time, he observed Volt watching it too, not flinching, not judging, cataloging. For the first time in cycles, Morn felt something unfamiliar in his gut. Not fear, not hope, possibility, dangerous perhaps, but necessary. He turned to the rest of the council. Commander Halvor, Specialist Volt, mission clearance approved. Tharnik's ceremonial alignment is in 5 rotations. If your proposal succeeds, Earth will earn its place at this table. And if it fails, Jor said acidly. Halvor turned toward the exit. Then we'll leave behind only silence. Volt followed. His footsteps were soundless, but the echo he left behind was deafening. They fear silence more than weapons. The words lingered in Senator Uruk Morn's translator as he stepped aboard the diplomatic cruiser Equinox. His ocular ridges contracted slightly, adjusting to the sharp contrast of Earth-manufactured interior light, cooler and flatter than the refracted glow preferred by Graal vessels. Human architecture didn't soften transitions, it exposed them. Panels, corridors and nodes all functioned like bone, stark, unadorned, structurally unapologetic. Commander Halvor stood ahead, speaking quietly to his mission staff near the deployment deck. Volt, meanwhile, loitered on the far end, shadow-like against the bulkhead. He hadn't moved in several minutes. No motion, no adjustment of weight, not even a blink. Morn stepped past an auxiliary crewman and took his place at the observation port, a tall, sloped aperture framing the orbital descent vector. Tharnanen loomed ahead, suspended in the blue curve of gravitational lock. Not beautiful, functional. A former mining rig retrofitted for diplomacy. Its spine bristled with defense towers like quills held in tension. Behind him, the Graal attaché, Rilak Thar, adjusted his proximity veil and leaned close. He hasn't spoken to anyone, he said, nodding subtly toward Volt. Does he need to? Morn replied, without looking. Thar's whisper grew more cautious. He tracks movement even while still. His retinal pattern shifts faster than normal blink rhythms. Morn's gaze narrowed. Dominance response calibration. Worse, Thar said. Recognition cycles. He's cataloging. A faint vibration shifted through the hull, not the voice of propulsion, but the transfer of mass through support infrastructure. Stabilizers adjusting to approach velocity. Morn knew this rhythm. It was the sound of transit under tension. Protocol, he asked Halvor as the diplomat approached. Sealed decks. No direct contact with Lurak Tuin until ceremonial entry. Pre-contact drills begin now. You'll find your orientation slate in your station module. Standard biological hierarchy posturing. Morn inquired. Halvor exhaled once, almost imperceptibly. With them, hierarchy is survival. It's not established through words. It's performed. The senator didn't ask for elaboration. He understood the implications. Earth hadn't just studied Lurak Tuin tactics. They had mapped their social grammar. Through the side corridor, Volt turned his head. Slowly, deliberately, he stared, not with aggression, not with warmth, but like a tectonic plate reading wind patterns. Thar stiffened. Morn simply met the gaze, and nodded once. The transit shuttle latched with a low, tactile thud against Tharnanese outer port. The lock sequence hissed open. The scent of recycled biosphere air filtered in. Drier, sterile, faintly infused with neutralizing agents. Not welcoming, but functional. The platform lowered in segments, descending into the diplomatic atrium. Laser plasma displays flickered to life above them, casting layered maps of the station's zones and vital readouts. Thermal drift indicators pulsed near red. Someone aboard had been sparring, or something worse. The Lurak Tuin arrived without announcement. No ceremony, no greeting, just presence. They entered like gravity had congealed around them. 3 figures, armored in overlapping dermal plates. Eyes blacker than void, gate-weighted with predatory stillness. Their war leader, unmistakable by the thoracic spurs along his left side, passed beneath the overhead bioscanners. The devices didn't chime. They didn't register anything. Behind a column, Morn felt his throat dry. Not from fear, from calculation. These were not diplomats. These were executions waiting for context. Delegate training began immediately. Earth's military liaison, distributed neural familiarity modules, vivid sensorium bursts simulating Loraktuan aggression protocols. The flashes weren't violent. They were code footstep angles, cranial tilt, talon spread, each one a signal. Ignore it, and you didn't die from ignorance. You died from irrelevance. Don't mimic what you don't understand, Halvor warned the group. The moment you perform dominance incorrectly, they smell it, not literally, neurologically. Rilak fumbled his module, muttering, and this Volt, he performs it how? Halvor looked toward the observation deck, where Volt stood alone, eyes fixed on the Loraktuan, entering the practice zone. He doesn't perform, Halvor said. He reflected. Morn found a moment to study him in private. He observed Volt watching the war leader from behind a visor embedded with triple-angled motion capture lenses. Volt's hand rested casually on a rail, but his fingers flexed in patterns, not fidgeting. In code, you see their hierarchy, Morn said to him, unprompted. But do they see yours? Volt didn't turn. His voice, when it finally emerged, was softer than expected, but stripped of any need for volume or inflection. They don't need to see it. They feel it. Morn stepped back, unsettled. The words weren't a boast. They were a law being explained. Training resumed. The chamber now mapped with containment fields and phase-neutralized response pads. Delegates rehearsed approach angles, failed conversational timing, and disengaged repeatedly under non-verbal pressure. The Loraktuan barely moved. They watched, unblinking, not amused, not impressed. Until Volt entered. No signal announced him. He simply stepped into their line of sight, and stopped. For a full 30 seconds, no one spoke. One of the Loraktuan shifted his back leg, the slight diagonal repositioning of a challenge. Volt inhaled once, subtle, measured, then lowered his gaze, not submissively, but like a lion allowing eye contact to the antelope. The predator didn't move again. The room's temperature didn't change, but perception twisted. Even the displays dimmed slightly, as if compensating for something unquantified, power, or something older than power. Later that cycle Morn debriefed privately. With Halvor, I watched him engage them without a single motion command. They responded. Why? Halvor didn't answer immediately. Then calmly, because dominance isn't always asserted. Sometimes it's recognized. The senator looked again through the laser plasma panel, toward the isolation chamber where Volt now rested, unmoving as the room around him adjusted to his presence, rather than the other way around. He didn't act like someone preparing for conflict. He looked like a solution awaiting the problem. He moved before the sensors registered it. Senator Urak Morn's words were clipped, soft, delivered to the debrief panel, 8 hours later. But at the time, inside the ceremonial chamber, no one had time to speak. The air in the Hall of Accordance hung low, as if the station itself anticipated failure. Light refracted off the obsidian-tiled floor, diffusing into narrow gold-threaded beams along the chamber's perimeter. Every delegate present had been instructed not to break formation, not to speak, not to signal, unless explicitly prompted. One wrong nuance, and centuries of diplomacy would become the afterthought of an obituary. Loraktuan war leader Tyr Lorun entered first. His claws didn't tap against the surface. They settled, distributing weight with mechanical intention. Each joint movement reflected evolutionary economy. Nothing wasted, everything directed. His dorsal ridges stood rigid, braced to full extension. Ceremonial compliance dictated a bowed posture. He remained upright. Earth's delegation entered second. Commander Halvor walked with exacting slowness, chin level, arms at neutral vector, eyes forward. On his right trailed Specialist Raisin Volt. Volt wasn't armed. He didn't carry a dossier. No headset fed him updates. The only object on his person was a narrow strip of tactile mesh, embedded into his left palm, a sensory relay device designed not to collect data, but to mirror environmental pressure and record muscle feedback. Morn sat high above, flanked by other council observers behind a tinted lens wall. Heads-up displays floated inches above his view line, parsing everything from heart rate to limbic variance across the room. Volt's data stream remained flat, not static, flat, like a vessel without tide. Beneath the ornate arches of the neutral chamber, the mediating delegate, an Arthelian peacekeeper named Vothan Rael, unfurled a ceremonial scroll plate from his thoracic sheath. His voice warbled slightly as he initiated the bonding address. Today, at this alignment of cycle rings and orbital trust, the unified council opens. A growl, deep, subharmonic. Tyr Lorun didn't wait for the speech finish. He lunged. There was no warning, no escalation, no misunderstanding. One breath aligned with a full-body torque. He launched forward, crossing 6 meters in the span of a heartbeat. Claws drawn, mandibles flared, dorsal spine splayed in full battle crest. Halvor didn't move. He wasn't meant to. Volt did. 2 steps, no pivot, no recoil, just a calculated angle shift. Shoulders squared, left foot braced, palm turned backward, fingers loose. The contact was not a strike, it was a command. A single biomechanically aligned slap landed across the apex predator's face. Not with the goal of damage, but of hierarchical imprint. Morn's retina overlay froze. So did the feed. Tyr Lorun stopped mid-air. His mass halted not by force, but by interruption of instinct. The slap connected across his sensory crown, specifically the convergence zone between neural awareness and ocular feedback. 3 things happened at once. His dorsal ridges retracted, his anterior claws lowered by 22 degrees, his pupils constricted. He knelt, not staggered, not paralyzed. He lowered himself in full posture of submission. The room froze. Heads turned without breathing. The Loraktun warrior behind Tyr Lorun shifted 1 foot backward, a move culturally equivalent to renouncing challenge. The third simply stood still, awaiting direction. Volt stepped forward, his boots whispering against the stone in a tone too soft to register on standard microphones. He stared at the war leader, his shadow angling across the predator's bowed frame. Then came the voice. Measured. Even. Unforced. We didn't come to conquer you. We came to show you why we never had to. No one spoke. Even the heads-up display feeds stilled, as if the data itself had nothing left to calculate. The ceremonial speaker still held his scroll aloft. It curled slightly in the airlock draft. Forgotten. Tyr Lorun's chest swelled once. He exhaled, not in anger but in recognition. Then he tilted his head, a gesture universally acknowledged among Loraktun ranks, as the submission sign of a lieutenant before a superior pack leader. A war leader had lowered his hierarchy, not to an army, not to a species, to a man. Volt stepped back, calmly, without celebration, as though the slap had not broken protocol but completed it. Commander Halvor turned to the council gallery. Earth requests an immediate review of dominance interpretation as a recognized interspecies protocol. Counselor Elgrin Jor leaned forward behind the lens wall, his claws twitching slightly. That wasn't diplomacy, he muttered to Morn. Morn responded without blinking. No, it was biology reminding us. We've mistaken negotiation for order. 1 floor below, Tyr Lorun slowly rose to his feet, not as aggressor, as something else. His shoulders were no longer flared. He stood at rest, yet aware, watching Volt the way a warhound watches its trainer, not fearful but alert to boundary. Volt had already turned away, walking back to the side platform, not with triumph but disinterest, as though the outcome had been pre-written, as though he had expected obedience. And perhaps Morn thought grimly, that was the most dangerous possibility of all. Rewind frame 76. Again. The bioanalytic suite at Tharnanax's upper deck glowed with a sterile intensity. Every surface cold to the touch, every wall humming faintly with shifting temperature differentials. Inside, a handful of alien scientists, neurologists, behavioral theorists, and threat assessment specialists leaned over their consoles, parsing the footage from the ceremonial incident 1 vector at a time. On the heads-up display suspended above the central table, Specialist Raisin Volt's frame appeared again. Side profile. The moment the slap landed played in 1/3 speed. Tyr Lorun's armored head jerked slightly to the side, his spine recoiling subtly, not from pain but from neural override. Pause. said Dr. Veltharn of the Janari Neurological Assembly. Focus on cranial lobe 2A, dorsal angle. I want blood flow patterns overlaid. A lattice of thermal imaging replaced the motion capture, and several of the delegates leaned in. The pattern lit up in pulses, not chaotic but rhythmic. Deep limbic zones, particularly those linked to hierarchical reflex and deference recognition, glowed in synchronized cycles. That's not just a physical response, murmured Veltharn. That's instinctual realignment. His brain didn't react to trauma. It realigned based on structure. Morn, standing behind the table, arms crossed tightly against his midline, spoke low. It matched imprint data from canid predation hierarchies on Earth. Didn't it? The silence confirmed his suspicion. Yes, Veltharn admitted. Exactly like wolf-to-wolf non-lethal submission patterns, except this isn't mimicry, it's origin. The air tasted filtered but dry, carrying that thin clinical neutrality shared by medical facilities, galaxy-wide. Morn exhaled quietly, his breath curling slightly under the chamber's cooler vents. To the side, a single chime rang from the diplomatic network console. Protocol Officer Drielek touched his panel. Transmission received from the Loraktun war barge. Status non-aggression compliant. Tone, voluntary. The entire room turned. Read that again, Morn ordered. No change. It's not a ceasefire. It's not a delay. It's a signal of cooperation. Veltharn blinked all four eyes slowly. The war leader submitted not just physically. He acknowledged inferiority. Publicly, and now, seeks alignment. That's not behavior we've ever observed, murmured one of the Sarnaxi neuroanthropologists. This isn't defeat. This is obedience. On a secondary laser plasma panel, detailed comparative brain scans rotated in slow motion. One displayed Tyre Laroon's cerebral map during aggression, the other post-interaction with Volt. The shift was stark. Regions linked to self-prioritization were quiet. In their place, elevated patterns glowed around group submission loops, rare even in naturally social apex species. I want his movement cadence logged to nanosecond intervals. Veltharn snapped, now pacing, his eye dilations, his skeletal shifts. Everything Volt did before contact. Already mapped, said one of the Earth technicians. Standing beside the chamber's edge, he didn't look up. It's been recorded in Earth's own combat physiology archives. We call it neural displacement posturing. And it works across species? Someone asked. The tech didn't answer. He just looked toward the reinforced viewing panel, where Volt now sat behind blast-shielded glass. He hadn't moved in 90 minutes. Morn's voice cut through the tension. What does Earth intend to do with this protocol? Halvor entered the chamber without announcement, stepping forward with a calm that only made the air feel heavier. It's not a protocol, it's an instinct we were born with. We just remembered how to use it. Elgrin Jor arrived moments later, flanked by two Vakal advisors. His expression was tight, jaw twitching with accusation before words even landed. I'm invoking investigative sovereignty under Article 6, he barked. Earth's evolutionary records, neurological data and military training frameworks are now subject to full disclosure. Halvor didn't react. The Council approved our inclusion under emergency intervention. All materials remain within scope. Jor stepped closer, eyes narrowing. That wasn't intervention. That was psychological reconfiguration. You didn't win respect. You rewired a warlord. No wires, Halvor replied. Just recognition. Your species suppressed instincts like this. Ours developed alongside them. That's not diplomacy. Jor. No, said Morn quietly. It's older. The data feeds blinked. New message. Loraktun representatives request entry under Dominance Clarification Protocol, read Drielek aloud. They've submitted 3 volunteers for structured interaction. Volunteer. Jor's voice trembled with something not entirely anger. They want more of him, Veltharn asked. No, Morn corrected. They want access. Exposure to what they now classify as superior command structure. The scientists gathered again. New simulations began rendering on the displays. Earth combat patterns layered over multi-species reaction tests. All results showed reduced aggression, increased focus, and most importantly, alignment. Morn turned toward the viewport again, watching Volt through a translucent filter. He was still sitting, eyes open, breathing slow. You should be careful with him, Jor said. Morn didn't turn around. Why? Jor hesitated. Because he doesn't feel like a soldier. He feels like... Morn's mandibles flexed once. A solution. No, Jor muttered, like a warning. Inside the observation room, Volt raised his hand. Just once. It wasn't a wave. It was a signal, and somewhere across the galaxy, the apex species that once devoured planets would kneel again, because their hierarchy had found its anchor, and it wore human skin. Activate blackout protocol. Council level only. The chamber sealed with a hissless lock, soundless and airtight. Light retracted from the walls like breath being held. From above, translucent barriers slid into place, shielding the room from station telemetry. The only illumination came from 6 rotating laser plasma displays casting pale glows across the central table, each loaded with Earth's declassified neural threat analytics. Commander Dresk Halvor stood at the head of the conference arc. Behind him, Specialist Raisin Volt remained statue still, his figure cast in refracted reds and silvers from the data bloom. He had not shifted in over 10 minutes. Elgrin Jor's eyes narrowed as another display flicked through motion mapping overlays, each a 3D reconstruction of Volt's movements during the SLAP event. Torque simulations, joint stress calibrations, ocular alignment patterns, all aligned with subjugation instinct triggers derived from apex predator psychology. This wasn't reaction, Jor said finally. It was choreography. Halvor nodded once, tapping the console embedded into the table's edge. New layers of data unfolded. Earth's internal military designations, coded protocols, psychological stress response metrics, chemical dampener ratios. We call it the Behavioral Dominance Initiative, Halvor said, BDI for short. Morn leaned forward. You're saying Earth designed that encounter? We engineered the opportunity, Halvor clarified. The Loricatron behavior profile showed a 97% likelihood of protocol disruption during ceremonial alignment. Tyr Lorne's history made him the most susceptible candidate. The variable was never if, it was when. And Volt? Asked Counselor Thurin, his voice a rasp of scaled skepticism. He's not just a soldier? Not in the conventional sense, Halvor said. He's a neural convergence candidate. His frontal subcortical mapping aligned perfectly with predatory recognition patterns. His eye movements sync with submission reflex triggers across over 200 cataloged apex species. Jor scoffed. You're telling us he was bred for this? No, Halvor said, his tone quiet but razor-edged. He was found, then trained. The table's data arrays shifted again, now showing biometric scans taken from Volt during his adolescent evaluation. Structural overlays of his hypothalamic cluster showed abnormal density in response mirroring zones. His amygdala had formed a rare double-looped pathway, suggesting instinctive empathy for fear, not as sympathy but command input. He doesn't just understand hierarchy, Halvor said. He triggers it. Biologically. Counselor Drell moved his claws against the table's lip. That's not strategy. That's programming. You mistake instinct for scripting, Halvor replied. Volt isn't responding to order. He reacts with coded legacy memory that dates back millions of years. Earth's predators didn't simply kill, they trained. The chamber fell into an unsettled silence. A slow pulse of light crossed the table, marking a new transition. The AI core had loaded Earth's deployment logs, not public ones, black code files. Where else have you deployed him? Jor demanded. Halvor didn't blink. Classified systems outside council oversight, contested regions, fringe colonies overrun with biologically dominant entities. You used him as a test subject. We used him as a signal, Halvor corrected. In every case, aggression dropped within 4 days. In some regions there were spontaneous social restructures among non-human hierarchic populations. Senator Morn's spines tightened slightly. So this slap wasn't your weapon? No, Halvor said, voice sharper now. It was our proof of concept. Laser plasma displays rotated again, this time showing Loricatron internal communications. Their command hierarchies had self-adjusted within 3 cycles. Requests for Earth advisors poured in, not as political emissaries, but as alpha-verified command supplements. The war species no longer wanted autonomy, they wanted direction. This isn't conquest, Thurin said, voice low, it's conversion. Jor pointed to the last data burst. Volt, Alpha 4, Earth's designation for the slap moment. You planned this as a defining act. We modeled over 3,000 variations, Halvor said. We chose the least destructive, the most educational. Did you intend to humiliate them? No, Halvor said plainly. We intended to reorient them. In the shadowed corner, Volt finally moved. One hand lifted, open, deliberate. He adjusted his stance, shifting one foot backward, an echo of the motion Tyr Loren had made after the slap. Jaws stiffened. That's what he did before submission. No, Morn said softly, eyes fixed on Volt. That's what he did before observation. He's showing you he remembers what you ignored. Behind the chamber, a soft ping sounded. It was not a transmission. It was a request. The Laura Katun Warcast had submitted a formal document, trial acceptance of Earth's dominance clarification protocol. They had agreed to training, not through force, through acknowledgement. Halvor stepped forward, his voice carrying a final undertone. Your mistake wasn't fearing what Earth might do, it was forgetting why we survived. Volt said nothing. He never needed to. And that, more than any algorithm, was why Earth would never need to strike twice. They didn't breach the outer perimeter. They digested it. Commander Dreskalvor's voice cracked through the briefing chamber's filtered air, as the laser plasma displays flickered alive, casting segmented overlays across the wall in angular red. The Cygnus Arm Outpost Station Deltaris shimmered on screen as a half-consumed ring of debris, its structural beams twisted inward like chewed bone. Behind him, the gathered command officers sat in grim silence. A Loraktun warrior shifted slightly, the plates along his flanks scraping against the chamber's reinforcement panel. Even he seemed diminished. The footage looped. A hive strike by the Harvester Collective, a biomechanical swarm that attacked not with projectiles or ships, but with engineered organisms that liquefied alloy, repurposed matter, and reconfigured hulls into biomass. Their signature wasn't destruction, it was assimilation. The outpost had a shielded core, someone muttered. Which didn't matter, Halvor replied. They phased through mineral structures and restructured the coolant lattice into ingestion veins. Defense didn't fail. It was reinterpreted. General Thar of the Jinari Legion folded his arms, mandibles twitching. And you believe your interpreter can subdue this? I don't believe, Halvor answered flatly. I know what he's for. Specialist Raz and Volt stood in the briefing alcove. As before, no rank patch, no command insignia, just a plain dark uniform, coated with carbon weave fiber, built for mobility. His gloves had been stripped back to expose the full neuro-relay sensors in his palm. Beside him, the Loraktun volunteer squad, 8 of them, from different hunting clans, knelt in formation, not a gesture of submission, but of alignment. They didn't look to Halvor. They watched Volt. Across the room, heads-up displays broke into tactical feed troop arrangements, terrain models, and organism movement patterns from the last Harvester encounter. Drone footage showed them surging, like an organic flood, limbs fused with adaptive scaffolding, eyes glowing with compound light, not from lenses, but internal neural biolights. Morn watched from the elevated glass ring. As a senator, he wasn't required to observe war briefings, but he had asked to be here, not to judge outcomes, to witness shifts in structure. The Loraktun volunteered, he said quietly, to the aide beside him. They requested him by name. The aide answered. In their dialect, they call him Thaskarel, the Still Alpha. In the lower deck, pre-deployment drills began. Volt moved first, silent, fluid, adaptive. He didn't shout instructions. He led through form. A gesture with 2 fingers indicated dispersal. A downward tilt of the jaw commanded approach. When he raised one foot and shifted weight backward, the nearest Loraktun immediately flanked wide, triggering a stagger pattern designed to misdirect swarm vectors. They respond without delay, Thar observed, tone almost reverent. They don't just respond, Halvor said, eyes narrowed. They mirror. The overhead feed transitioned to real-time swarm movement near Nurek Drift, another outpost under siege. Biomechanical horrors looped in upon themselves, chewing through comms towers, while releasing signals static laced with thought harmonics. Every destroyed object became part of a growing collective. And yet no Harvester unit had ever faced an opponent like this. Volt wasn't leading a traditional strike. He was directing instinct. The Loraktun didn't march, they hunted. They slinked through vented tunnels and scaled ship spines with coordinated speed. Under Volt's command, they weren't soldiers. They were a behavioral algorithm, mimicking his cues, adjusting to his reactions, adapting to his microtensions. Morn leaned toward his feed. Send word to the Cygnus relay. Inform the outer arcs that Earth's interpreter is en route. Will that reassure them? The aide asked. No, Morn replied. But it will stop them from interfering. The Harvester Collective detected the incoming strike fleet before it arrived. But their reaction wasn't formation, it was curiosity. Their neural matrices had no record of this new signature. Human ships carried no fear telemetry. Lorec-tuned pulse patterns indicated something beneath aggression. The first wave was launched manually. Volt's hand came down like a gavel. The signal was kinetic. The units moved in unison, each action calibrated to overrun the swarm's momentum. Every Lorec-tuned strike landed not with brute force, but disruption angles, attacks calculated to break feedback loops inside the Harvester hive mind. Still, the swarm adapted. It split, it circled, it learned. But Volt didn't just counter, he repatterned. Standing at the mouth of the collapsed fuel corridor, Volt observed the Harvester's shift strategy. A drone came too close, its limbs already extruding toward Volt's flank. Volt pivoted, not away, but forward. His knee bent, his right foot twisted slightly outward. He didn't raise a weapon, he simply extended his left palm outward, fingers arced, not in defense, but dominance assertion. The drone froze, literally. Its limbs trembled, then folded inward. It retreated without further movement. The Lorec-tune who had witnessed it howled in synchronization. That was no kill, it was submission. Back in the command bay, Halvor turned to the AI Leon. Update directive code. Volt node. What's the trigger? Direct eye engagement. Full body freeze. Observed at 7 meters. That's a behavioral override. No, Halvor, that's a species remembering how to obey. Drone feed streamed faster now. Kill rates dropped, not from inefficiency, but withdrawal. Harvester command drones began signaling retreat pulses, something not observed in 37 encounters. Morn stepped back from the display, face rigid. They were designed to overwhelm logic, consume protocol, but they weren't designed to handle instinct. Halvor finished. Volt bypasses cognition. He doesn't argue with threat, he reminds it of its place. The final Harvester unit wasn't killed, it self-immolated. The battlefield went still. Volt didn't issue a victory command. He turned away. The Lorec-tune followed. Every eye in the chamber knew this war had shifted axis, not through brutality, through behavior. Cut the corridor at segment 3. We need visual choke. The order traveled across the strike net faster than any translator. Volt hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. Every unit knew the cadence, the cues, the briefest signals embedded into movement and timing. Each command was a shape, not a sentence. Harvester Nest Delta 4 stood embedded in the moon core of Lyraik 7th, a labyrinth of bone-like conduits and tissue-hardened pylons wrapped around a neurospine reactor. The structure wasn't designed. It had grown, fed by consumed habitats, folded vessels and metabolized atmosphere processors. The Joint Strike Force hovered just beyond the perimeter, 100 warriors in coordinated triads. Half human, half Lorec-tune. No banners, no noise, just waiting. Inside the mobile command shelter, Halvor reviewed the heads-up feed, a composite display showing layered troop alignment, heat differentials across the outer hull, and the internal pulsation of the breeder nodes. Every few seconds, a central cluster blinked with neuron flares, Harvester Alphas orchestrating pulse traffic for swarm control. They're clustered tight around the node, said Commander Veyrin, human field strategist. Classic stack pattern. They think numbers mean strength. Halvor didn't blink. Then they've never fought a formation that hunts back. He turned to Volt, who stood facing the tunnel entrance. The Lorec-tune beside him flexed their claws in anticipation. Not bloodthirsty, but attuned. Pack energy. Calculated tension waiting for signal. Volt raised 2 fingers. Veyrin tapped the drone control. Execute lure phase. Seconds later, 2 unmanned decoy pods launched into the tunnel. Their thermal signatures mimicked distressed biosigns, accompanied by randomized pulses designed to mimic fragmented speech, just enough to suggest panic, not enough to decode. From the nest, movement surged. Harvester units scrambled forward, 5, then 10, then dozens, moving in ribbed quadrupedal patterns. Their carapace armor clicked as they climbed across the organic scaffolding toward the base. Just before impact, the pods exploded, not with fire, but with dispersal foam, laced with anti-neural feedback. It blinded the swarm's signal coordination momentarily. That window was all Volt needed. He advanced at a glide, Lorec-tune fanning out on either flank. They didn't rush, they surrounded. Cut point C now, Halvor ordered. Explosive charges set days prior by infiltration teams ripped downward. Segments of tunnel collapsed, forcing the harvesters into a narrowing ring. The swarm clawed at each other in confusion, trying to regain pathfinding. That's when the strike units moved. Volt didn't fight as a commander, he danced. Each of his gestures triggered movement around him. One palm twist. Lorak Tuin leapt overhead to intercept a harvester drone flanking right. A head tilt unit 4 dropped under a clawed swipe and severed 2 limb tendons. There was no shouting, no death chants, just motion woven into outcome. Drone sensors recorded the strike team weaving between harvester limbs, carving through their formations without hesitation, without no wasted steps, no fear cues. And when one harvester alpha emerged, nearly triple-mast, bearing an auxiliary hive pulse organ across its chest, Volt stopped. He stepped into its path. The unit slowed, its optic core aligned with him, waiting for movement. Volt didn't raise a weapon. He locked eyes, not through dominance, but through recognition. A stillness passed between them, not of peace, but of place. Then he spoke. Now. One word, low, even, deliberate. The Lorak Tuin to his right didn't hesitate. He drove a fang-lined blade into the creature's side, bypassing carapace with anatomical perfection. The harvester didn't screech. It simply collapsed, its pulse command severed. The remaining swarm units paused, and then began retreating. Not fleeing blindly, backing down. Submission, not defeat. Inside the command chamber, the sensor readouts displayed something no one expected. Swarm disengagement rate, and 100%. Morn, watching from the data station aboard the observation deck, whispered to himself, "They're not responding like soldiers." Halvor stood beside him. "Because we didn't train them like soldiers. We tuned them like instincts." The tactical playback looped. From every angle, the strike appeared not as a battle, but a culling. A single unit's motion echoed through 100 bodies. It wasn't war. It was behavioral command theory implemented with surgical resolve. Jur, sitting at the far edge of the council line, scowled. "This isn't sustainable. This kind of coordination can't be replicated without submission. Isn't replication." Halvor interrupted. "It's recognition." And now, they've seen. Volt exited the tunnel first. His armor barely scratched, his breath unbroken. Lorak Tuin followed, forming into staggered, perimeter arcs. None of them spoke. A harvester limb twitched nearby. Volt turned. One look. It stopped moving. Morn stepped away from the observation feed, the reflection of the laser plasma display still etched in his corneas. "They don't follow because they fear him," he said. Halvor didn't look up. "They follow," Morn said again, slower now, "because he's what they would have been if their evolution hadn't ended in consumption." There were no victory cheers, no ceremony, only quiet, and the knowledge that something new had entered the battlefield. Not a soldier, not a killer, a reminder that hierarchy when real doesn't need to shout. "They are no longer advancing." The words came from a watcher of the VAR coalition, whose race had never known retreat, let alone broadcast it. His voice filtered through the multi-council session with a weight it wasn't designed to carry. One by one, representatives from 12 outer systems confirmed the same truth. The Harvester Collective had disengaged. Not with surrender, but with withdrawal. No swarm activity had been detected in over 3 rotations. Breeding nodes lay dormant. No hives pulsed. Scout tendrils went out, touched nothing, and returned unconsumed. What had once surged without boundary had simply stopped. Inside the central diplomatic tier, Senator Urak Morn sat watching this new calm ripple across laser plasma displays. Each map that once screamed with motion tracking now lay still, empty. Not peaceful, but reordered. His gills remained motionless as he scanned the latest request logs. The Cernathi wanted Earth behavioral tacticians. The Uxians sought dominance pattern modulation advisors. The Shaka referred to it only as the calibration. He leaned back in his chair and muttered to his aide, "We've replaced chaos with something deeper. But is it safer?" Across the table, the Lorak Tuin envoy, war caster Brothkal, stood with a grace uncharacteristic for his kind. His armor bore no tribal scars now. They'd been stripped and smoothed, no longer badges of supremacy, but symbols of transition. "Our kind were born with fire in our veins," Brothkal said, his voice resonant and slow. "We knew no rank but dominance. We consumed, competed, survived." He turned slightly. meeting Morn's gaze without challenge. And yet none of that gave us structure, only instinct. Earth showed us another layer beneath it. Silence followed. No one interrupted. They did not tame us, he continued. They aligned us. They brought form to a roar we thought was complete. Now, we hear rhythm inside it. A diplomat from the Stellar Ascendancy adjusted her lens apparatus. You speak as though Earth awakened something spiritual. The Loraktuan inclined his head once. You call it protocol. We call it the listening. The term caught like embers in dry fields. Whispers across the chamber carried fragments. The voice, the still order, the silent alpha. None of it had come from Earth. The names emerged uninvited, from species who had never shared syntax before. Outside the council chamber, across battle-scarred sectors, quiet requests began trickling in for Earth's emissaries. Not ambassadors, not negotiators, but interpreters of place. Inside the low-lit enclave of Tharnike, Vault stood beside a tactical relay node, watching a training session in progress. Loraktuan recruits mirrored human movement drills with eerie synchronicity, no vocal orders, only observed response pattern. He remained still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes tracking every muscle contraction, every weight shift. He said nothing, and yet every warrior adjusted based on his breath. From behind, Senator Morn entered. The door hissed shut behind him. They don't react to gunships like this, the senator said. They don't respond to force. Halvor replied from the corner, his arms folded. They respond to form. Morn stared for a long time before speaking again. Why does he stay silent? Halvor didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward the training arena. Because they already know. The senator walked forward, standing beside Vault, without addressing him. Together they watched the last wave of recruits fall into sync. It feels like religion, Morn said quietly. Vault blinked once. Then, his mouth opened. They're not praying, he said. His voice, deeper than anyone expected, resonated against the walls. They're listening, he continued. Every predator wants to know where it belongs. He looked directly at Morn. We simply answered the question. Nothing more. He returned to watching the drills. Later, as data reports streamed into the council core, they painted a picture none could have foreseen. Harvester incursions dropped to null across 13 systems. Loraktuan units formed rotational leadership packs, modeled after Earth squad designations. Behavioral conflict in fractured border regions fell by 63%. Species once considered ungovernable were now forming alignment circles, calling them response rings. Senator Morn stood before a blank report draft. He couldn't title it. It wasn't about victory, not entirely about peace, certainly not about fear. Eventually he keyed in 5 words. The submission of the wild. He paused, staring at the screen, then deleted the last word. Too narrow. He replaced it with one Vault hadn't said, but had exemplified. The realignment of order. And for the first time in cycles Morn realized the galaxy hadn't been dominated. It had He never blinked, not even once when we gave him the list. Senator Urak Morn stood against the transparent alloy of the high-orbit viewport, watching the curve of Cygnus 9 fall away below them. Through the filtered atmospheric lens, the light over the outermost colonies looked softer, like evening embers settling into ash. Behind him, Commander Dres Calvar finished securing the case file inside the sealed lock. The laser plasma display above them rolled through names of frontier systems: Kerr Vale, Hera's Loop, Cell Trins, Scar, each marked with 2 letters. IS. Instinctual subordination. The Council had ratified Protocol 7 that morning, not as a trial, as doctrine. So this is our solution, Morn said at last, his voice quiet, but laced with something too old to name. Subdue the chaos with something it remembers, something older than language. Halvar stepped beside him, eyes on the shifting starlines ahead. We didn't invent dominance, he said. We just stopped pretending we outgrew it. Outside, deployment vessels flared from docking brackets like fluid daggers, each carrying units trained under the new framework. The Loraktuan had contributed entire hunting packs to the model. Others had followed. Packs, clusters, circles of alignment. Some called them cohesion cells. Others had adopted newer language. Still others simply used Earth's term interpreters. Morn turned slowly. I watched him break a warlord with a hand gesture, he said. Then I watched entire systems ask for more like him. Halvar said nothing. So tell me, Morn continued, what happens when a predator forgets whether it's being guided Or own. The commander's gaze flicked toward the inner deck where engineers were loading the final cryo chamber. Aboard the ship, Volt lay inside it, eyes closed, not in rest, but in transit. Even asleep, his posture looked tuned. Halvor exhaled softly. You're asking the wrong question. What's the right one? Halvor's eyes didn't leave the chamber. What happens when the ones we're guiding stop needing us because we've already taught them how to command? Morn's mouth pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Is that the end of the threat? No, Halvor said. That's when hierarchy starts echoing without us. The senator looked out again, this time watching the growing fleet take shape. The tension across his spine didn't lift. And how many of him are there? Halvor's voice was almost too quiet to hear. He's not the only one, he said. He's just the first who volunteered. Morn didn't speak again. He just watched as the lead cruiser powered up its drive. The sound was deep, felt more in the bone than heard. It wasn't celebratory, it was deliberate. Earth didn't raise a banner, it didn't declare authority. It simply left orders in its wake. As the chamber sealed and Volt's cryo-sleep pod slid into its housing, a final update blinked across the heads-up console in muted green. Destination, Farah's reaches. Detachment, IS-7. Status, initiated. No headlines would cover it, no parades would greet them. But across the galactic rim, predators looked to the dark between stars and felt something shift. Not with fear, with acknowledgement. And the galaxy exhaled, because even the wild had remembered where it belonged.